What's up everybody, my name is Austin. Welcome to the channel where we talk about everything comic book related. Today we're here to talk about issue 129 of Nightwing in the Dan Watters run. Now if you're not reading this run, I highly recommend it. It's really good so far. Now as you can probably tell by the cover, there is a new superhero in Bludhaven alongside Dick Grayson. Now there is some prior context required to understand this issue. Allow me to explain. In the issue prior, Nightmite is under attack by someone called the Zani. Now the Zani is a god. He's kind of like Loki almost, and he's been around supposedly since Nightwing's childhood. Now the Zani started to take over Nightmite's realm, and that's what we're going to be covering in this issue. Now the issue starts off with Barbara Gordon narrating, and she says, to save Dick Grayson's life, we are going to have to make chicken soup. To make this soup, we need one whole chicken, vegetable broth, or meat stock. Assorted vegetables, onions, carrots, celery, and peas could all be good. Unfortunately, we are in the middle of an extra dimensional crisis, have none of these things on hand, and are going to have to improvise. Fortunately, the ingredients for chicken soup can vary wildly from recipe to recipe and are generally about using what's available. In a place of whole chicken, we have Dick Grayson, Nightwing, the hero of Bludhaven. Instead of vegetable, let's use the Beast, the mangled anthropomorphic creature that was formerly Nightwing's dog, Haley. Not having any broth on hand, instead we have the weird and wonderful world of Titanus, a vast realm inside of Nightmite, a fifth dimensional imp who has taken over Bludhaven's former Titan's tower. The first thing we need to do is let these primary ingredients get to know each other in the broth. This is easily done as Nightwing has been locked in a prison cell with the Beast. Now Nightwing recognizes that this is in fact his dog that was transformed by Nightmite's fifth dimensional reality warping. He says, Haley, stop, and she does, and he says, good dog, and she repeats the same words. And she says, yes, I am, good dog. Nightwing, good human. And Nightwing says, atta girl, you've been transformed. And she says, yes. Oracle says, Nightmite, he is sick. This place is sick. Nightwing asks Haley, where is Oracle? She's still in the penthouse, and she said, I came looking for you. Dick says, I need to find her in a way to undo what's happened to Nightmite. And Haley says, she is working on it, but now we are trapped. Nightwing says, this suit I'm wearing is charged with kappa radiation. It breaks down fifth dimensional matter. This cell is fifth dimensional matter. We need to find a weak point, but I don't know if I can apply enough force. Haley asks Nightwing for the stick, and Nightwing gives it to her, and she is able to burst out of this glass. Barbara continues narrating and says, now that our primary ingredients have started to work together, the kitchen should begin to fill with wonderful aromas. And that it does. Dick says, do you smell that? And she says, smell? Dick says, it's food. It's like something from my childhood. And Barbara says, at this point we can add our noodles. Instead of which, we'll use Nightwing Prime, their erstwhile jailer. And this is where we see Nightwing Prime, and he says, I'm sorry Nightwing, but I can't let you destroy this place. Barbara says we can add our noodles uncooked while they're still brittle and allow them to cook in the soup. Nightwing Prime is certainly feeling rather brittle right at this moment. Van Zee is the original Nightwing, a Kryptonian hero from the bottled city of Kandor, a cousin of Superman actually. This is not actually Van Zee, but he sure thinks he is. Nightwing says, damn it Van Zee, Titanus isn't real, and he says, you don't get to decide that. Nightwing says, I'm sorry, but you're making me do this. You're a fifth dimensional construct, a figment of Nightmite's imagination, and I'm gonna have to unmake you, so de-exist. And he tries to hit Nightwing Prime with his staff, but it doesn't work, and Nightwing Prime says, guess I'm real. He slams Nightwing back down into the ground as we see Nightmite sink further and further. He slams Nightwing back into the ground, and we can see Nightmite gradually losing control over his realm from the Zani. Nightwing Prime says, look at that, you're hurting Titanus. But that's when Nightwing's dog Haley says, you hurt good human, and she grabs Nightwing Prime. But he points and looks and says, you've done it now, you've summoned the Deathwings. Now if you're not familiar, Deathwing is basically an experimented human who believed himself to be Nightwing, and it looks like a couple of them get summoned here. Dick, still laying on the ground, says, I smell it again. I know what it is. Alfred's chicken soup. And we get a flashback and Alfred says, Master Dick, I can hear you. And a young Dick Grayson says, you don't hear me. I've been trained in ninjutsu by Batman. And Alfred says, and yet there is no more finely attuned ear than that of a guardian listening for a child to sneak out. Back to bed with you immediately. But Dick says, Bruce needs me. Patrol. We have a job to do. And Alfred says, you have a temperature of 102. Your job is to recover. And curiously, Dick asks, what is that? It smells good. And Alfred says, it's the very best for when one's ill. And Dick replies, better than medicine? And Alfred says, it is medicine. It's chicken soup. Dick says, can I stay and watch you make it? It's nice in here. I keep feeling cold in bed, but also hot. And Alfred says, of course you can, Master Richard. Barbara continues narrating and says, smell and taste are so tightly tied to memory. Nightmite has never experienced pain before. In a panic, he built Titanus, a scream for help to his hero. He built it from a jumble of Nightwing's history because Nightmite doesn't really understand time. He doesn't understand that events begin and they end. Things work differently in the 5th dimension in ways unimaginable and indescribable to our 4th dimensional minds. Imagine encountering excruciating agony, a broken back, or a root canal sans anesthetic as your first ever experience of pain. Imagine not having a concept that this sensation, the horror that's flooding your body, will end, that there is relief coming, that things will work out. We find Barbara sitting at her computer and she continues and says, "And this is why I'm making existential chicken soup, because I think you can hear me, can't you, Nightmite, even if you can't respond. Dick used to tell me Alfred made him the best chicken soup in the world whenever he was unwell. It was a source of extreme comfort for him. You know, a good chicken soup does have anti-inflammatory and antibacterial properties. That's not really its function, not really. It's the place it holds in our psyche. The comfort, the reassurance, knowing we are cared for, reaching out through our pain for something warming, heartening, a lifeline in the dark, just like he is." As we see Nightwing take on the different variations of the Deathwings, and Nightwing Prime take on Haley in the background. Nightwing Prime says, "You can't win, Nightwing. Titanus defends itself. More loyal soldiers come to join the fray. Witness the power of the mighty Nighthair." And Nightwing's like, "Nighthair? Holy identity crisis, you're not Van Z." We see Barbara ask Nightmite, "Do you understand, Nightmite?" And he screams out in pain and says, "Nightwing is chicken soup," which is obviously just him trying to say that Nightwing is his source of comfort. And when he says that, the entire interior of Titanus starts to flood with chicken soup. Nightwing Prime starts to panic and he says, "Stop this, stop it, you're destroying my life." And Nightwing says, "This isn't your life, kid." Nightwing Prime is confused and he says, "What are you talking about?" And Nightwing says, "Bryce Moran, you're 11 years old, a good kid who was running with a bad crowd. You broke into Titan's tower, didn't you? Trying to prove yourself or whatever. And then Nightmite happened. He changed everything in here, used whatever material was at hand to try to find Nightwing, any Nightwing. And so you became this, but it's a fantasy." And Nightwing Prime, who we now know is Bryce Moran, says, no, that's not right. It can't be." Bryce takes off flying and says, "I can't go back to what I was." And Nightwing tries to stop him and says, "Wait." Now, if you're not familiar, Bryce Moran is a young boy who Nightwing helped try to escape the life of crime after he witnessed his older brother, Marcus, get gunned down by police. Marcus and Bryce were both orphans who were just trying to find a way to survive, and they wound up running with a gang called the Teddies. And that is where Nighthair comes from. That animal was Bryce's pet. Nightwing sees the hole that Bryce put in the top of Titan's tower and says, "Damn it, that might be a whole new problem, Haley." He picks her up and says, "I don't think we can have him running around out in the world with the power of a Superman, but you look back to normal. So I guess we'll just need to make Nightmite undo it." An elevator door opens and Barbara says, "Might be a little difficult, Boy Wonder. I think Nightmite is sleeping." She holds up a bowl with what seems to be Nightmite inside and says, "Or as close to that as a Zerfian can get." Barbara explains and says, "I was safe in the penthouse zone. I think even in his pain he tried to protect me. So I was able to epistemologically hack his nervous system using yours." She continues by saying, "A semiotic reset using good memories." But before she can finish, Nightwing grabs her and kisses her. Dick asks, "Did I rescue you?" And she says, "Of course not, but thanks for trying." Nightwing says, "Let's get him out of here." But Barbara says, "I might have to hang back a while, Boy Wonder. Secret identities and all that. We seem to have developed an outside audience." And outside we see Olivia Pierce, who was the provider of Nightwing's suit that allowed him to destroy 5th dimensional constructs. She says, "The city has been saved thanks to Nightwing's utilizing of Spheric Solutions' hostile atmospheric suit, which I designed myself. We will be fast-tracking the atmospheric suit to market after this successful trial run, ideal for military operations in unknown territory." Nightwing walks out a door behind her and she says, "Ah, here he is, safe and sound thanks to our tech, right, Nightwing?" And he says, "I'm not here for a photo op to help you sell weaponry, Pierce. You can have it back." But she says, "This is, we hope, the start of a fruitful partnership between Spheric Solutions and the protector of Bludhaven. We love this city and we love its hero after all. There's only one Nightwing." And here we catch up with Bryce Moran and he says, "My name is Van Z. I was a scientist on the planet Krypton. I lived in the city of Kandor, which was stolen, shrunken and bottled by the tyrant alien Brainiac. In Kandor, I took on the identity of Nightwing, named for a Kryptonian bird, named for a Kryptonian god. I did my best to do good like my cousin Superman, but I am also Bryce Moran, a cub in Bludhaven's Teddy Gang. My parents have been out of the picture for years. My brother was murdered by the police a few months ago. I've never had the chance to do anything with my life. I've never even left the city, and now I can fly to outer space. I am Van Z, and I am Bryce Moran. Both of these things cannot be true, but they are. So perhaps it is easier to say I am Nightwing Prime, and I am going to help. I am going to save the world like the heroes do, whether Nightwing likes it or not. And that brings us to the end of the issue. I have been loving Dan Watters' Nightwing run so far, along with the art by Dexter Soy. He really just kills it. I'm very interested to see what Dan Watters is going to do with this storyline. Knowing Nightwing, something tells me that he's going to be able to get Bryce to be a good hero, and it would be really cool to see Bryce help Nightwing take on the Zani. It would be pretty cool to see him help Nightwing take down the Zani, because technically speaking, the Zani is the reason that he got turned into Nightwing Prime. Anyways, let me know what you guys think in the comments. I definitely recommend reading Dan Watters' Nightwing run. I will see you guys in the next video.